At the start of this year, I was sick. And not in a way that could be cured by cough drops or cold medicine, nor in any sort of life-threatening way. I wasn't slurping down bowls of noodle soup or sticking thermometers under my tongue, nor was I lying down on couches and talking to a therapist. No, I was sick of this. I was sick of being assaulted by polos and Patagonia and pea coats. No offense, Matt. And no offense to Ms. Lau and Mr. Congiano and all of my teachers and all of the students who are perfectly happy here, but I was sick of Shady Side. I know how beautiful our campus is and how privileged we are to be here, how top-notch our education and school culture are, but I was ready to leave. And yet, it was on one of my nightly FaceTime calls with Angel, in the middle of ranting about just how eager I was to leave Shady Side, that I began to realize just how much I would miss it, the good and the bad. You see, as I told Angel, I am a storyteller, which means that I get through life by viewing it all as one grand narrative. At high points in my life, the narrative is enjoyable to be a part of. And at low points, the narrative is at least entertaining. And Shady Side has never failed to entertain me. What I've learned through my time here, as I've learned through my creative writing studies with Ms. McDonald, is that you can't always control the course of your story. The other characters will betray you unexpectedly on page 3. The fictional world itself might burst into flames, and sometimes even the first-person narrator, secretly sometimes me, will change without any warning. But today, I'm going to give you some tips on how to guide your narrative here at Shady Side and beyond by laying out 3 chapters of my own SSA story. So, skipping right over freshman year, which was mainly about finding the bathrooms and learning everyone's names, I'll begin with chapter 2, sophomore year and the art of changing course. It was a year that opened with these words: "You have to choose, though I haven't yet, between the excellent grades and acclamations that our parents expect and the charmed life that we could have here and now." This line from one of the first stories I wrote in my independent study was very clearly about Shady Side and the vast number of choices we're faced with on a daily basis, though it's faulted in the dichotomy it sets up, the false dilemma, as Mr. Smith might call it. As a sophomore, I was convinced, as way too many of us are, that we do have to choose between grades and good times. And for that reason, we become afraid to choose anything outside of the path we've set for ourselves. We become afraid to change course. So I, as an uptight and high-strung sophomore, was afraid to change my athletic choice, a change as simple as ditching the tennis courts for cross-country. In fact, when I found that I'd forgotten my gym clothes on the first day that I was supposed to start running with the cross-country team, I almost quit there and then. But I'm glad I didn't, because in making the change to cross-country, I then joined track in the spring and was able to do the musical in the winter. I no longer laughed at calling myself an athlete or feared the very concept of singing and dancing. I was crossing finish lines and acting in Into the Woods, even if they turned my microphone off. And through all of those changes, and because being willing to change actually changed me, I made some of the greatest friends of my life on the cross-country course, in track races, and right here on this stage. Of course, while sophomore year was about having the power to choose my course, the following year was anything but that. And it will fittingly be titled Chapter 3, Junior Year and How to Live in a Pastel Hell. It also fittingly opened with these words from a story I'd written over the summer. "There was nothing to cry over and nothing to hope for. The world was gray and dark and numb. The funny thing about this story that this line was from is that it began simply as a stream of consciousness piece. I put my pen to paper and wrote without worrying about whether or not the words would make sense. So what came out of that writing session was a gray, dark, numb representation of how I was feeling going into that school year, with the realization that the other characters had deceived me, the world had burst into flames, and even I had changed without warning. Yet, I cut my path through that school year in the same way that I'd written my super depressing stream of consciousness piece. I just stopped worrying about whether it all made sense, and I let the world, my narrative, tell me what was next. Because that year wasn't about making decisions or worrying about results. It was about screaming out car windows at midnight and running onto the football field after we beat Burl and laughing at everyone on the Gateway Clipper. It was about being fully a part of this gigantic mess of high school that I had suddenly somehow found myself happily in the middle of, because there was nothing I could do to clean it up, and in some ways there was a beauty to that. There was a beauty to the pastel hell. Which brings me back to polos and pea coats and short shorts and where we are right now. Chapter 4, Senior Year and a Cure for Sickness. Simply put, my cure came in the form of these lines from my most recent story. If you ever gave it a try, you'd learn that these people aren't as similar as they first appear. They may operate by the same motions and dance to the same songs and speak in the same accent, but they are simply moving to a common rhythm that we aren't adjusted to. They are not the same. And in spite of these somewhat limited fashion choices here at Shady Side, I have learned over the course of this year that no one is by any means the same. No one is merely pastel. In fact, maybe the only identical quality in any of us is how eager we all are to leave. And I think that eagerness is simply because so many of us have become so isolated within our own heads that we often fail to see the uniqueness with anyone but ourselves. I certainly had. And while I realize that our aversion to everything and everyone related to high school was completely normal as a group of seniors, I also realized that this was the climactic moment in my story where the main character had to change. This was the final hour when the main character, when I, had to overcome my sickness and grow as a person. Because while I may say that I'm tired of everything or annoyed with everyone, there's something I appreciate about everything, something I've learned from everyone at this school. This class, my class of 2017, has especially taught me the value of good storytelling, changing course when I can and should, finding the nuanced beauty in what superficially presents itself as a pastel hell, and most of all, coming to love the characters in my life. Because I do love the characters in this class, even you, Mac. And and I know that there will never be another group quite like us, because our narrative here is coming to an end. These were our stories. These were our character arcs. And now, this is our ending. The end. For now.